All right, and welcome back. NAMS class, we are in section 11.2. We're talking about interest. Guys, this is really, really important, real stuff. I'd like you to really focus on this. In previous years in doing this, this is where kids really caught on and learned some real practical stuff that they can use in their life. So, we're talking about loans, guys. We're talking about, whenever you want to buy a house, want to buy a car, whenever you want to, do something within your life, what it's going to cost. And this stuff's very, very important. We're going to talk about some vocabulary, and then we'll talk about how to calculate simple interest. Now, understand, simple interest is basic interest, borrowing a small amount of money, okay? In 11.3, we'll talk about compound interest, which is the big stuff when you're buying a house or a car or a boat or something like that. So, let's move on. Now, obviously, these are filled in on my notes. They are not filled in on your sheet. You need to write the definition of each one of those on your sheet. Principal of the loan. This is the amount of money a bank or other lender is willing to lend you. Okay, so, you want to buy, I don't know, a new computer, and maybe the bank is willing to lend you $500. That's the principal. Now, for that bank to lend you $500 or the amount of money you need to buy that loan, you're going to need to have security or collateral. Collateral is something of value that you're going to pledge so that if you don't pay back the loan, they can take that from you. So, maybe you put your car down as collateral on this $500 loan for a computer. What does that mean? That means if you don't pay back the $500, they can take your car, okay? Understand, guys, people don't just give away money in this world. That's not how it works. You have to have something to be able to use as, a vouching point or something you can pledge for that. That's the collateral. Now, let's say you don't have collateral because every so often, you're 16 years old and you want to buy a car and you don't have anything in collateral. What can you do? Well, there's a thing called cosigners. And sometimes a bank will grant a loan without any sort of collateral or security, but what they're going to require is the signature of another individual. This is the cosigner. They're basically vouching for you, if you're receiving the loan, that if you don't repay it, they will. I'll give you an example. Whenever I was 16 years old, I wanted to buy a car, and I didn't have any credit, and I didn't have any collateral or security. So my parents co-signed for me. When co-signing for me, what they were saying was if I didn't pay back the loan, they would pay it back for me. Once again, guys, the idea here is people just don't lend you money hoping you're going to pay it back. You will either have to have security or collateral or a co-signer, because regardless, they're gonna get their money back out of you. There's no way they're not going to. That's just how it works. Now, another piece of information, personal notes. Whenever you actually receive a loan, there will be a document or a personal note that says the terms and conditions of the loan. How many months do you have to repay the loan? What percentage of interest are you paying on the loan? All the specifics to the loan. But this stuff is real, and it's absolutely 100% very, very important, so make sure you get it all written down. Moving on, a couple more pieces of vocab. Interest. Interest is money the borrower pays for the use of the lender's money. If they lend you $500 to buy a computer, you're going to pay back $500 plus interest. That interest is the amount of money that you're paying them for the use of their money. Simple interest is a formula. It's a basic formula that's used to find basic interest, and it is based on the entire amount of the loan. Now, the simple interest formula is I equals P times R times T. Let's write out some things. P is the principal. That's the amount of money that they are lending you. The R is the rate. This is where kids mess up. Please pay attention. Rate must be as a decimal. We will talk about that, but that is the most common place that people mess up. And finally, T is time, and our time is almost always in years. This is very, very important as well. You got to make sure the units in time match up, okay? And we will talk about that. The time units have to match the rate units. If they don't, there's a conversion that needs to happen. This is huge and the most common place that things get messed up. Let's talk about some basic examples. Find the simple interest. Well, if we are lent $2,400 at a rate of 8.75% for 4 years. What's the amount of interest? We will do I equals P times R times T. That is I equals 2,400 times the rate. Here's where you can mess up. Just watch this being messed up, okay? If you were to enter 8.75 as the rate, this isn't right, okay? But just say you just took that number, 8.75, and then multiplied it by times 4. Multiply that number out and see what you get on a calculator real quick. I got a number of $84,000. 84,000. Understand something. If you borrow 2,400, you're not going to have to pay back 84,000. That's clearly a mistake going on right there. And I point this out because this will happen to a lot of you. And when this happens, I need you to go back and go, "Oh, I know what happened. I forgot to convert the rate to a decimal." Yeah, that's right. The rate has to be as a decimal. Let's remember from last section, how do we convert from a percentage to a decimal? Well, what we do in that case is, sorry, there's a little mess up going on there. I'm going to fix it here real quick. Once again, how do we convert from a decimal to a percent? Well, if we have 8.75%, we move the decimal point back 2 spaces and insert zeros wherever necessary. What I'm saying is this should be 0.0875. Now, when you multiply all that out, it will provide you with a reasonable number. Here I've got $840, and yeah, that's reasonable. If you are lent $2,400, they may expect you to pay back that $2,400 plus $840 as interest. Just judge reasonableness. It's very, very important. Let's move on to our bottom example. I equals P times R times T. So we are using a principal of $430. The rate is 3.4%. Let's convert that to a decimal real quick. I've got that as 0.034. And then we're going to multiply that times 2 years. The result here is $29.24. Those are the real simple types of simple interest problems. But we can make them a little more complicated. Here's how we do. We make it so that the actual rate doesn't match the actual time. This is really messes things up. It really does, okay? Now, let's talk about how we're going to do this. First thing we're going to do, I equals P times R times T. I'm going to insert the principal. We're still going to convert the rate to a decimal. Move it back 2 spots, insert zeros wherever necessary. However, we're not going to write in 90 here. The reason we're not going to write in 90 right here is that's saying it's for 90 years, because annually means once per year. It's every time per year. And this isn't in years. The labels don't match. How do we get the labels to match? Well, we convert this guy into our rate label. So how do we convert that into years? Well, you ask yourself, how many days are there in a year? It says here we're going to assume there are 360 days in a year. And what you have to do to convert these days to years is divide that 90 by 360. That right there is the toughest point. That's where people get messed up big time. Got to be super careful. And multiplying these 3 pieces together, the result is 24.0625. Now we can't leave that because that is not in dollars and cents. I will round to the hundredths place, which makes it $24.06. Again, check that part out right there. Make sure you ask questions when you come back tomorrow if you do. I'm going to do the bottom example. See if you get it. Going to do the same thing. I equals P times R times T. Now, our principal is $587. Now, I know it looks weird, but we absolutely have to convert our rate to a decimal. And you may look and go, well, it is a decimal. It's 0.045%, but it's still a percent. The fact that it's still a percent means you still have to roll that decimal place 2 places to the left and insert zeros. Our rate should be 0.0004 0.45. That's a tough point right there. And the actual amount of time. Well, we can't just put in 2 months because this is not in months. You've got to convert your actual time label to your rate label. Well, this is in days. So you ask yourself, how many days are there in 2 months? Well, we'll look up above and it says assume there's 30 days in 1 month. So if there's 30 days in 1 month, how many days are there in 2 months? Well, to find that, we would multiply the two times 30. I hope you would agree with me. There's 60 days in 2 months. So if we take our 587, multiply it times our rate, 0.00045, and then multiply that times 60, our result here is 15.849, which once again is not dollars and cents. It needs to be rounded. Rounded appropriately, that's $15.85.